Hopefully you can now see my slides. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks to all of you for attending. I am thrilled for this opportunity to talk about the future of math education. Over my 20-year career, I've conducted a lot of studies on both technological and non-technological innovations in math education. I'm excited to share with you what I've learned. Now, whenever I think about innovations in education, I can't help but think about one of my all-time favorite quotes, which is by Dr. Larry Spence. In 2001, he wrote, "Plop a medieval peasant in a modern dairy farm, and he would recognize nothing but the cows. A physician from the 13th century would run screaming from a modern operating room. Galileo could only gape and mutter touring NASA's Johnson Space Center. Columbus would quake with terror in a nuclear submarine. But plop a teacher from the University of Paris from the 15th century into a Berkeley classroom, and he would feel right at home." Now, I definitely think we have made progress since 2001, but unfortunately, I think it's probably still true that in many university classes, a 15th century teacher from the University of Paris would feel right at home. Now, I think in my calculus class, the 15th century math teacher would recognize nothing but the desks. They certainly would not recognize the mathematics. And I don't know if you've been looking around lately, but I don't even think that they would recognize the students. Students have changed so much. However, it's not like all those areas have advanced in technology and innovations, and education hasn't tried, at least. We have, for a long time, been trying to innovate in education. In the 1920s, they thought motion pictures would replace textbooks. In 1930s, radio was going to revolutionize education, and some universities even started radio stations. In the 1950s, it was television. In the 1970s, it was computers. And a decade ago, it was online education. And in the past, these have all suffered from the same fatal flaw. They were about trying to change education to use technology rather than looking at how technology can fill a gap in education. If there's going to be an education revolution, it'll need to be based on the science of learning, the study of how we learn, remember, and recall information. Education could really use Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace had a visionary perspective. She focused on how technology could be used rather than being limited by what it looked like it could do. In education, I think Ada Lovelace would have thought about how can we use technology to improve education rather than merely seeking ways to incorporate existing technology into education. Let me describe what I mean with a couple of examples. First, eye clickers. Eye clickers were developed in response to physics education research. That is, they identified a gap in education, that of hand raising is not particularly engaging and does not give the instructor a good sense of how well the students are understanding the concepts. And so they actually did quite a few studies using a variety of different methods to see what was going to work the best. And they came up with eye clickers. Research has shown that eye clickers have had a positive effect on education because they were literally designed to do that. On the other hand, consider smart boards. Smart boards were not developed to fill a gap in education. They were invented because, well, the technology existed to do it. I remember when first smart boards came out, there was a lot of hype. No, hype is the wrong word. There was a lot of marketing about how smart boards were going to revolutionize education. In the end, research showed that smart boards had little to no effect on student learning. Now, it's also not always so cut and dried. For example, online education. If we do online education because we can, I think it is way less likely to be successful than if we use online education to fill recognized gaps in education. And we even saw a little bit of that already today. And so while it can be very tempting to innovate for innovation's sake, and I know I've been there, doing so rarely leads to significant improvements in education. Like smartboards, it's not like they couldn't be very beneficial to education, but when we try to innovate for just innovation's sake, then it's way less likely that we're going to use the technology to really improve education. All right, so what I think we really need are some principles for incorporating technology into math education. We should not just, yeah, try things. We should look at some principles to try to do our best to ensure that the technology we are going to incorporate is going to improve education. So let me share with you the 3 principles I've come up with for incorporating technology into math education. The first one is we should choose technology that ensures that, let me rephrase that. We need to choose technology that is going to align with our pedagogical practices. Thanks to research and advances in technology, we know quite a lot about the learning process. And I don't just mean cognitively, I mean also from behavioral and psychological perspectives. So it is now easier than ever to ensure that we are innovating in a way that will support student learning and help us achieve our learning outcomes. Now, I wanted to highlight a few important parts here. Now, first, and I think most importantly, if there is only one thing you are going to remember from this presentation, then this is the thing that I want you to remember. And that is when we are picking technology to incorporate, we should make sure, or do our best to make sure, that it is supporting rather than diminishing social learning. In math education, we know how valuable social learning is. In many cases, those conversations students have outside of class are as important as what they are doing in class. In my personal experience in my undergraduate degree at the University of Northern British Columbia, we had a math room where undergrads of all levels hung out and talked about math. I learned so much in that room. And so I've really experienced the value of social learning. But social learning also goes beyond just learning the mathematical content. We've known since the 1960s that it builds self-efficacy, motivation, teamwork skills, from my point of view, very importantly, learning skills, and it helps students build an important sense of community. I have personally seen how my poor interpersonal skills have affected my career progression, and so it's really important to me to help students develop these social and interpersonal skills. Now, for technology, we have things like audience response systems, like iClickers, that can be used to motivate in-class peer instruction, and so can be used to support social learning. Moving components of education online have been shown in many cases to reduce social interactions. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't use online education. We've already seen that it has lots of benefits. But what I am saying is that when we do move education online, trying to do our best to incorporate and introduce social learning is extremely important. All right, I do want to practice social learning here. So let me give you, say, 30 seconds to, in the chat, put your favorite innovations, technological or not, that you've used that supports student learning. So I'll give you 30 seconds to do that while I try to find the chat. I've lost the chat. There it is. All right, Mentimeter, oh, Kahoot. Ah, Piazza. Piazza's a great comment. How many people use Piazza? Oh, hello, Jennifer. All right. I wasn't timing. That should be around 30 seconds. Uh, in the end, you can see there is lots of stuff out there to increase social interactions. I highly recommend that people try these things out. All right, on to my next point. If I can get back to this, there we go. Improving engagement. Now, I want to highlight something important here. I have chosen the word improve instead of the word increase. I think we have to be very careful about what we are getting students engaged in. We know from psychology research that it is much better to engage students through intrinsic motivations, such as building their interest or at least appreciation for the topic, as opposed to getting students motivated and engaged through extrinsic motivations, such as grades, rewards, or competitions. In the end, it's not about getting students engaged. It's about getting students engaged in learning. Now, once again, audience response systems like iClickers or Mathmatize, I have to mention Mathmatize, is very helpful because getting students to engage in the content rather than being passive participants. I have seen many examples of gamification that does focus mostly on the extrinsic motivations of rewards or competitions. Now, again, I'm not saying that is bad. What I am saying, though, is that trying to also incorporate those intrinsic motivations, show students how the content can be used in the real world, or otherwise trying to build their appreciation or interest, I think adds a lot to just trying to motivate through those extrinsic rewards. Now, I want to tell you a funny story that I heard recently. Last week, I was giving a presentation at Cornell, and we were talking about these kinds of things. And one of the people mentioned a program that uses streaks to get students to do a little bit of practice every day. And so the idea behind this is fantastic. We know the benefits of spaced learning, so try to get the student to do a little bit of every day and get them the desire to maintain their streak. But at some point, the streak can become more important than the learning. So in this particular case, I was told that the student recognized they would not be able to do all of their daily activities to maintain their streak. And so they asked their mom to keep the streak going for them. And I think so at some point, I think we're missing the point there. So the engagement needs to be about learning. All right, and speaking of engagement, let me do this again. I'll throw into the chat things that you have tried, again, technological or not technological, that you think improves engagement. Zoom polls, clickers. I love in-class quizzes, but I love quizzes in general. I hope you don't have all 300 people at the same time, Anna. All right, think fair shares. I love think fair shares. We got back to things like compute. Oh, WebWorks, that's great. So again, jokes and stories. That's a great, absolute one. I love that, Carrie. And so this is fantastic. Again, there are so many options out there. And I think this is why this kind of conference in particular is so valuable, is we're not always going to hear about all of these different options. And so talking to people and sharing the things that you have found that work can be so incredibly helpful. All right, but before I get too distracted, let me move on. And my next point is that it needs to manage cognitive load. Cognitive load is the amount of working memory resources that is being used at any given time. We have known since the 50s that we only have a limited amount of working memory capacity, and cognitive load theory shows us that we need mental resources available to learn effectively. And so when students' brains are overwhelmed with new or complex information, they simply won't have the mental resources left to learn. Now, I'll quickly talk about two methods of managing cognitive load. The first is to break complex pieces into smaller chunks and try to ensure that students are proficient in these smaller chunks before combining them into a more complex piece. So, for example, adaptive learning platforms are pretty good at this. They're good at recognizing when students are struggling with a concept and then break it down, find the previous pieces of knowledge the students might need to do the more complex task, and helps them become proficient with that. On the other hand, no, on the other hand, on the same hand, calculators can reduce cognitive load in the problem-solving process. They take away that brain power required to evaluate complex expressions so the student can focus on the problem-solving process and the content. And that's the last time I'm ever going to speak nicely about calculators. Another way we can manage cognitive load is by trying to reduce extraneous cognitive load. Extraneous cognitive load is essentially any mental resources that are going to things that are not productive for the learning process. And so, of course, the big one to mention there is cell phones. Cell phones have been proven to add a lot of extraneous cognitive load. They can be a huge distraction. And so this is why we are seeing more and more places ban cell phones from the classroom. All right, this time I will say do not put anything into the chat, because putting things in the chat and reading things in this chat are going to add to your cognitive load. Now, I won't punish you if you put things in the chat, but you know. All right, moving on to a quick comment about plickers. So give me a thumbs up if you've heard of plickers. All right, so we've seen a few. So the idea behind plickers, and I won't talk much about it, is if you don't like the idea of students having cell phones in the classroom, and you want to do the audience response system, so students answering multiple choice, plickers is an option. Now, I haven't tried them personally. I plan to try them next term. If you have used plickers after my talk, please reach out to me and let me know how you found them and if you have any tips for me. All right, moving on to my second principle, and that is to use technology that promotes student thinking as opposed to replacing it. So we know from cognitive science that deep processing of information is required for learning. We need to really think about things if they are going to be encoded in long-term memory. Similarly, we know that we need to promote the learning of basic skills and facts. And this is so important in mathematics. We know how mathematics builds. If students don't have firm grasp of the foundations, it is so difficult for them to learn more advanced, complex tasks. Imagine a student trying to do a trigonometric integral if they don't know their basic trigonometry. Once again, I will speak in this case for audience response systems like Mathematize. They can really engage students in the deep thinking in class rather than just being passive participants. Another thing that I use is online rapid fire tests to help students memorize and learn all the basic skills and formulas. And yeah, they're online. Students can use them as many times as they want. I'm finding them really helpful. Now, on the other hand, calculators. Calculators do not help students learn basic skills and facts. Quite the opposite. They make students believe that they do not need to learn basic skills and facts. I once had a student in calculus who, on their calculator, I watched type 8 times 3.14 times 0. I still have nightmares about that today. I've also done a little bit of research on this. I agree. In that I've watched over the years as graphing calculators have become more and more used in high schools, that the number of incoming students who can correctly graph the basic trigonometric functions has depleted immensely. 15 years ago, I had about 92% of students could graph the basic trig functions. This year, it was 62%. That's kind of sad. In the end, we know from neuroscience, the brain is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. When we learn anything, even those basic skills, that makes the brain stronger and gives it the ability to learn more and more complex tasks. I also think of it in the terms of muscle like weightlifting. We should start with those light weights and build up rather than straining our brain. Now, I want to show you one of my absolute favorite videos. And the purpose of this video, partially, is to give you a break from my voice, but is to show you how powerful the brain is. So in this video, you'll see two girls doing flash and zen. So basically what that is so numbers will flash on a screen and they will mentally add them up. While they are doing that, they're also going to play a game. And the game is a Japanese equivalent of one person says a word and the next person has to say a word that starts with the last letter of the previous word. In Japanese, it works with character groups, but you get the idea. All right, so here we go. I think. There we go. Play. Ah! All right, isn't that amazing? Now, I agree, it is of limited real world use. Rarely do we have numbers flashing on a screen and we need to add them up. But I wanted to show you this video for a few reasons. One, it shows a use of using technology to improve education. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just using technology, in this case to flash numbers, is a way of improving education. So don't think you have to do complicated things. I also want to talk about what I mentioned before about intrinsic motivation. See how much fun these girls were having doing this. They were learning for learning's sake. But, and I think this is most important, they have learned just how much they can accomplish, the amazing things that they can do through practice and hard work. And if there's one thing that I would love all students to learn, it is exactly that. And so when we can use technology to help students accomplish these things, I think that is one of the best things we can do. All right. Lastly, I wanted in this category to talk about making sure that when we choose technology and use technology, that it increases student understanding. For an example here, I will consider visualization software such as GeoGebra or Desmos and the like. So these can be used very effectively. They can show students things that they would otherwise have a lot of difficulty understanding. Or they can show a piece of a complicated something that will reduce their cognitive load so that the students are more likely to understand the complicated thing. On the other hand, if these are used to make it so that students don't have to think about it, or if they take away from students' learning how to go about understanding something, then I think that is a problem. Let me tell you about one study I did. So for one group of students, I used GeoGebra to demonstrate the rectangular rule of Riemann sums. So I used GeoGebra, had a variety of different graphs, showed them a number of rectangles, and I could increase the number of rectangles and they could see what happened. And so they could view it quite nicely using GeoGebra. The other group of students, I had them draw rectangles by hand, and that's all they did. So they had two graphs, they drew 4 rectangles and 8 rectangles on the same graphs, and that was all they did. In the end, I asked the groups how to improve on the accuracy of the Riemann sums. The majority of students in both groups came up with the idea of increasing the number of rectangles. However, way more students in the hand drawing group came up with the idea of using different shapes, trapezoids, or doing a curve between the endpoints than the students who only looked at how to see what was happening. So in the end, students doing something is better than students just looking at something. Another example from my youth is logarithm tables. Again, give me a thumbs up if you've used logarithm tables, even know what logarithm tables are. All right. Just in case for those who don't know, so logarithm tables are basically tables where if you wanted to find the logarithm of a number, you'd have to look on this table to find the value. I learned way more by looking up logarithms on tables about how the progression of logarithmic growth. Yeah, trig tables too. All sorts of tables we had. Statistics tables. It was great. We learn way more by looking these things up and can see the progressions than just getting numbers from a calculator. So in the end, do not underestimate the importance of productive struggle. Just making it easier for the student to understand is not always better. Students can really learn from that productive struggle. And I'm going back also to that importance of deep processing. All right, finally on to my number 3 principle for incorporating technology in math education, and that is to ensure it is accessible and inclusive. So of course, we have to think about affordability. And here I don't just mean affordability so for students to use it, but and especially this is important in Ontario right now where universities are having budget crises. We also have to think about the cost in general to implement and use these technologies. Also, we have to make sure that they are universally usable. So try to ensure that it is compatible with other assistive technologies. Now, an interesting example here is VR. So VR is amazing and great, and I'll talk a little bit more about it a little later. But we know that some people simply cannot use VR headsets. And other people are particularly susceptible to VR sickness. Now, in this category, I wanted to mention that AI has really made one piece of education way more accessible and inclusive. And that is cheating. Cheating is now way more accessible and inclusive. You no longer need a smart friend or to pay someone online to do your homework. Everybody now has access to free, almost instantaneous cheating. It's really accessible and inclusive. Okay, in addition to my principles, I have a few other considerations that I think people should take in mind for incorporating technology. So first is that optimally, the technology should have formative capabilities. So help students identify what they know and what they don't know, and help the instructor understand what the students know and don't know, track the student progress, and or help inform the teachers' teaching practices. Second is about cost effectiveness. And here I don't just mean about cost in terms of money, but also time. I have seen a lot of education research that boils down to if students spend more time on a course, they learn more. And I believe that. But students are already so busy. At some point, it is not sustainable to just keep adding more and more time to their workload. And of course, there's also instructor time. It takes time, and we've already heard about how long some things take, to develop these things and to incorporate them into your teaching practice. If we are going to be effective teachers, we also need to think about our health. And so try to maintain a healthy work-life balance. Next is reliability. And I want to talk about two things here. So first, you want to make sure it'll pretty much always work. Now, my experience, no technology works all the time. And so if you are using technology in class, have a backup plan. And I emphasize that because I've learned the hard way about that. So try to have a backup plan. Technology is not always going to work. The other thing is try to make sure the technology is more reliable than a person. But it doesn't have to be perfect. I know people who don't want to use some technologies because it's not perfect, like AI, for example. However, it doesn't have to be perfect because we people are definitely not perfect. Are you using AI to do grading? If it's better, more reliable, less bias, more consistent than people are, then I think that is an important consideration. And finally, for completeness, I have to mention we have to consider privacy and security. Okay, we have gone through my principles and considerations. And so now I would like to talk about the current state of some popular technologies. And like Ada Lovelace, I will try to look to the future. All right, so the big one, artificial intelligence. The question is, will artificial intelligence transform education? No, that's actually a terrible question. The answer is a definite yes. Most definitely, artificial intelligence will transform education. In fact, we've already seen a little bit today that it is already transforming education. Earlier this year, Alpha Proof and Alpha Geometry together solved 4 out of the 6 IMO problems. Now, it took them 3 days instead of the 9 hours that students have, but it is only going to get better. In the previous talk, we're hearing that right now AI is not perfect, and you can somewhat tell when students are submitting things via AI, but it's really going to get better fast. And not only is it getting better, but students are getting better at using it. And we also heard that comment earlier. So I am worried that non-proctored assessments are going to pretty much become obsolete. Although I think we have already heard some good strategies for trying to counteract this. I love the idea of if you suspect them of using AI, then give them an oral exam. That's a great idea. What I'm afraid of is AI glasses. Have you seen what these things can do? So AI glasses, someone can be in front of you speaking a foreign language, and on your glasses, almost in real time, it will give you a translation on your lens. It is amazing. How long until a student wearing these glasses and they look pretty much just like regular glasses? How long until the student can just look down at the test, tap their glasses, and it will print the answer on their lens? I'm not even convinced we don't have the technology now to do this. So I'm worried. Maybe proctored assessments are going to become obsolete. AI will definitely transform education. So maybe this isn't the question. Maybe the question is, will artificial intelligence transform education for better or worse? No, I don't like that question either. And what I don't like about that is, A, it's kind of just an opinion, but I think as educators, we can actually affect the outcome of this. If we think about those principles and considerations for incorporating technology, we can transform this question into how can artificial intelligence be used to transform education for the better? It is up to us to use AI in a way that's going to support learning and our learning objectives. All right. A little bit here. Let me quickly look over the current and very near future of artificial intelligence. So there's basically two main ways that it can be used. One is for personalized learning, and we're already seeing all of this out there. So, for example, adaptive learning platforms. So again, this idea of it identifies where students are struggling and adapts the problems to meet their needs. And the now thing that is really starting to take off, I'm seeing more and more of them out there, and that is AI tutors. And there's quite a bit of research around the effectiveness of AI tutors for learning outcomes. And again, that worries me a little because as AI tutors become pretty efficient, effective tutors, I am worrying about the social learning aspects going away. The other aspect of this is instructor efficiency. So in the not too distant future, we will have automated grading and instantaneous feedback. Just imagine your students hand in their final exams, you scan them, and then 30 minutes later, the students are getting all of the constructive feedback that they could want back to them. We talk so much in education about the importance of that instantaneous feedback and corrective feedback. The AI can do this on tests. And then, of course, is content creation. Now, the AI is still a little deficient here, but again, it is only going to get better and better and better. Now, a couple things I want to talk about here is A, I'm not so sure I am thrilled about the idea of automated grading. I recognize that I'm in the vast minority, but I like grading. And generally, when I say that, some people will post, oh, here, you can do my grading for me. I'd love to, just kidding. In the end, I really feel that we can learn so much and help our students better by the grading process. I credit one of my benefits to my teaching skill was that at the University of Northern British Columbia in my undergrad, I had a lot of marking duties and I paid attention and learned about common mistakes in student thought processes. And again, I think that's really benefited me in my teaching. That being said, I also am a huge fan of mastery grading. The main difficulty in implementing mastery grading is all of the marking that needs to be done. So if we can have AI mark instantaneously, then mastery grading becomes a real possibility. The other aspect that scares me too is the instructor efficiency part. As we have budgetary concerns or other financial concerns at institutions, institutions will recognize that if instructors don't need to do grading or provide feedback or content creation, that they can get more and more and more and more students being taught by a single instructor. And the problem with this, this goes back to the ideas of motion pictures and radio and television, is that teaching is a lot more than the transmission of information. AI will never be able to increase a student's interest as much as a person can. The AI telling the student, I love vector calculus, just does not have the same impact as an instructor's natural enthusiasm. On the other hand, it's probably still a little bit better than the instructor telling the students how much they hate the content. All right, the future of artificial intelligence. So I put on my best Ada Lovelace hat. And what I immediately recognize is I am no Ada Lovelace. But let me tell you about some of my ideas. All right, first, AI oral exams. During the pandemic, I had a course where we conducted over 800 oral exams for over 800 students. Now, I didn't do it. We had an army of TAs who did it. And while I thought it was beneficial, I never did it again. The logistics and challenges and even equity was really challenging. If we can get AI to do oral exams, they can be efficient. They can be way better done than probably a person can do. I think this is amazing. All right, next, learning skills tutor. Why are we getting AI to teach the content? I want AI to teach the students learning skills. Teach them and help them develop those learning skills, those long life learning skills. This to me, excuse me, I got too excited. This to me is one of the best things. So get rid of the AI tutors. I want the AI not to teach content. I want it to teach learning skills. Next, advanced analytics. So soon AI will be able to recognize trends in students' behaviors and results and much quicker identify struggling students. And not only that, but suggest best strategies for helping those students. It can also identify places in our teaching that where we may have thought we were doing a good job, but we could actually improve. I think the advanced analytics that AI will be able to offer will be extremely helpful. Next, the AI pupil. Again, get rid of the AI tutor. We know how important and useful it is to try to teach someone else the content. So I want an AI where the student has to teach the content to the AI. I think that would be amazingly helpful. And finally, my best Ada Lovelace kind of idea is hyper-personalized learning environments. So starting like kindergarten, the student just gets the AI. The AI will recognize their aptitudes and interests, and it will develop the content and assessment and progression, the whole curriculum from kindergarten all the way through their graduate studies. It can make it exactly perfect for the student. Bad news for us, although maybe we can get jobs producing the hyper-personalized learning environment. All right, moving away from artificial intelligence, audience response systems. So I think in pretty much everything I've talked about, I mentioned what a great example audience response systems are. So we have already seen develop in these, and I think we'll continue to see further improvement in how these can engage students. I love what Mathematize has done, so it's not just multiple choice. We'll also see the incorporation of AI into audience response systems that get them personalized for students, not just get a students to input an answer, but get personalized feedback and, again, suggestions of learning skills, etc. For the future, I imagine personalized adaptive response systems. So this is what I mean. So students doing an in-class activity. They write their solution on a piece of paper. They hold it up. The camera in the room, because Big Brother is watching us, will read their solution. If they are correct, it will, if there's time remaining, provide them with an extension problem. And if they're not correct, it'll provide constructive feedback and let them try again. So yeah, this hyper-personalized adaptive audience response systems. All right, finally, and I recognize I'm starting to run out of minutes, but that's okay, I'm almost done, is virtual reality. Virtual reality, I definitely see coming in the future. I think they will get rid of the possible drawbacks of VR, a sickness, and not everyone being able to wear VR headsets. And we know already how incredibly valuable these things can be. And we know that from pilot training. So flight simulators, which are essentially virtual reality, have been absolutely incredible in improving pilot performance and airline safety. So developing these things for education is huge. Now, while virtual reality have more applications in other fields, I do think there's lots of applications here in mathematics. So students can do experiments to see how to, or think about how to develop a differential equation, or how something matches a differential equation. They can act out a related rates type situation or optimization problem. I think there's lots of ways we can incorporate engagement here. All right, the future is virtual in-person universities. So take the advantages of online and the advantages of in-person and put them together. So we can have virtual in-person universities. At the last Sigma on Room conference, they actually had this. So attendees could virtually interact with each other and in-person participants through this virtual reality. And it was quite effective. And so I'm actually surprised that I have not seen in the news already some university offering virtual in-person classes. If anyone knows of this, let me know. I have heard that some places in China are at least moving in this direction already. Okay, enough of me talking. In the end, here are my principles for incorporating technology into math education again. And I know how valuable and important it is to innovate in education and how useful technology can be. However, I have also learned from experience that when innovating, we do need to focus on improving education through our knowledge of the science of learning. Lastly, I want to warn you against too much technology in the classroom. Whether you believe that an instructor should be a guide on the side or a sage on the stage, we don't want the role of instructor to become tech support. All right. Thank you very much. I am now open for discussions and questions. I hope you found that helpful.
Thank you so much for this amazing talk. I see a very hot discussion in the chat regarding to everything.
I see the word dystopian. That's I'm afraid. I'm so afraid.
Okay, now time for questions. Audience, you can bring up all your questions now. Okay. Is anybody here? Oh, this is just claps. Okay. New message. Okay. Okay. Yeah, all discussion was about glasses. First discussion was about glasses, no glasses in class. And the question, how do you think, how you can avoid this? Because you really cannot prohibit glasses. Even worse, you cannot prohibit contact lenses, which also can involve some tech, like Elon Musk, right? Nano chips or something like that. It can be incorporated in lenses easily once it's incorporated in glasses. The question is, how do you think? How we can avoid it, or should we ignore it, or how it might work?
So we shouldn't ignore it. I don't know if we're going to be able to avoid it. What I think we have to do, And I think this goes beyond what we can do just at the university level. We have to start making impacts at the earlier education levels. And we have to bring back that education is not about earning a grade, that it's about the learning. And as long as students are grade focused, and there's such importance on grades, then students will use the AI. They will find ways of cheating. And I hear a few people who talk about that, well, they don't care if students cheat because in the long run, students are robbing themselves. And well, I mean, that's in some case true, but I am dedicated to the student learning. And so we need, not just as educators, but as people in society, we really need to get the focus back on learning and the importance of knowing, so that people, while they might be able to cheat, will recognize that it's not in their best interest.
Thank you so much. Somebody rose hand. I don't see. You can Luai. Yes, unmute yourself and ask question. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for this amazing talk. My question is about using technology in a class. I'm a fan of that, and I love using technology in a class. And I think there are many benefits, including improving engagement and all of that. So my question, how you balance between the cost and reliability? Like all the time I have a concern about, I don't want to like the students pay additional, fees for that. And also I want to have a reliable and a good tool as well. So how you could like balance between all of that?
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's tough. And I think you have to really think about your own pedagogical choices and how you want to use the technology. And so I think, yeah, there's a lot of factors that go in there. One of the things that I want to stress is that I really do think that we can use technology too much. The OECD report on computers in the classroom showed that students who use computers moderately in school have slightly improved learning outcomes over students who use none. But students who use an excessive amount of computers in the classroom actually have greatly reduced learning gains or performance. And so I think one way of not overdoing it with cost and not having to worry about too much reliability is don't fill up your entire class with technology. Pick the things that you think are useful. Pick the things that you think are affordable. Pick the things that are the most reliable. And again, I don't think it has to be perfectly reliable. As long as students understand and you tell them that, hey, this is not perfectly reliable, I think that's great. Getting the students to critically think about what they're seeing, I think is an advantage. But in the end, many years ago, and I can't find the paper, but many years ago, I went to a conference and there was an amazing talk about a framework for evaluating innovations in math education. And it had factors like cost and reliability and efficacy and how much students like it and all these factors incorporated into. I thought it was just amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. There are a couple questions in the chat. My question, Eric and Jonathan, did Dan answer your questions or not?
I haven't.
I guess somehow you answered.
Well, so I'll throw out here. So if I could only pick one technology for my classroom, it would definitely be some sort of audience response system. That being said, maybe actually, when I think about it, maybe I'll change my answer. I've recently, based on my learning of cognitive load theory, I'm trying a very different practice than what I've done in the past. And I am finding teaching from PowerPoint slides really useful, despite in the past when I tried them, well, I did it badly. So I would actually, I'd have to really think about whether, yeah, I think the audience response system or the way I'm using slides is more impactful. Probably I would lean toward the audience response systems.
Thank you so much. And we have a question from